This is Dr. Ron's Words of Wisdom, words on leadership, goal setting, productivity, and a whole lot more. I hope that you will consider this a vitamin or a supplement for your mind, your heart, and your soul. Wherever you receive podcasts from, would you mind subscribing, or would you please subscribe to Dr. Ron's Words of Wisdom? And if you could leave a rating and write a brief review, in order to help others who don't currently know about this podcast to be able to find it. It'll be very, very helpful. Today, as we dive into talking about leadership, I want to discuss in some general principles leaders I have known. Now, we all know about leadership because we've read books or blogs or podcasts or have gone to seminars, and we follow certain gurus that we like and certain leaders that have really helped us. I'm in that category, as are you. But what I really know about leadership today, much of it is because I observed it in leaders I served with and served under. And I just thought it might be a good reflection to tell you about 8 things that I learned from leaders I've worked with and how I try to implement that into my own life. The very first thing that sticks out in my mind of some of the leaders that I have been around in my lifetime is they were honest, and sometimes it was painful. They told me the truth even when I wish they would have made something else up. I wish they would have sanitized it or cleaned it up a little bit. And even, I have to be honest, there were times when they had meetings with me that I left with my feelings hurt, yet I knew they loved me, they cared about me, but they were honest. Leader, we do no one any service by being dishonest and by failing to tell the truth. I don't mean we just find harsh and critical and mean-spirited ways of expressing it, but we all need honest appraisals, honest evaluations. And then not just that, but then telling us how we can improve and telling the folks that you work with how they can improve. And so one of the things that I admire in so many of the leaders that I had over the years is they were honest with me, even when I know it had not only to be difficult for me, but it was difficult for them. The second thing that I remember about leaders I've served with that really stick out in my mind is they valued everyone. Not just the high flyers and the high performers, but everyone else. I remember when I was involved in perhaps the smallest church on a particular district where I served. And whenever my leader saw me, he would embrace me, he would encourage me, he'd tell me how good I was doing. Now, I just said he was honest, and he was, but I never went to a meeting. I was never around this particular leader, and a few others as well, in which I always knew that I was a valued member of the team. They valued me. And I think, leader, one of the greatest things we can do is to value the people we serve. And I picked that up from several of the leaders that I served with. The third thing that I remembered is that some of my leaders were people-focused. Now, they were focused on whatever the bottom line and whatever the mission and whatever the goals were of the organization. But the ones that stick out in my mind are the ones who focused on people. Now, I'm not saying that behind closed doors they didn't read reports. They did that, and they evaluated, and they were working on goals and mission, yes, without question. But the leaders that have had the greatest impact in my life are the people who knew none of that would happen if we don't focus on people. So, leader, though you maybe need to put your head down and get some work done, look the people in the eye. Speak to anyone, regardless of where they serve in your organization. Value them, focus on them, because they are a major reason why we're doing what we're doing. The fourth thing is one that I really appreciated in leaders I served for, and that is they never seemed defensive. Because it does not matter who you are as a leader. Not everything you try, not everything you attempt is going to work beautifully. some of the things will fall quite flat. And I never remember, a couple of leaders stick out in my mind particularly, that when things that they did or were a part of were called into question, they answered the questions candidly, honestly, without much emotion, and I sensed they were never defensive. I have been around people and leaders who were defensive if anyone questioned anything, not just about them, but even about the organization. The leaders I have known who've made the greatest impact on me were never defensive. If they're wrong, they admitted it. If it didn't work out, they stated it. They were never defensive. They never felt that they were perfect and every decision they made was from Mount Sinai. They understood that sometimes you have to reevaluate, sometimes you have to reconfigure and go another direction. And what I admired about many of these leaders I served with, they were never defensive. The fifth thing that I really remember sticking out about some of the leaders that I've served with is they were willing to suffer the consequences of their decisions. Leader, this is where so many leaders fall, because some of the decisions you're going to be asked to make will be quite easy. As people say, they're no-brainers. But there are going to be some decisions where you have to decide, and there are good people on both sides. And there are people lobbying you for whatever their particular view is. I didn't realize how important this was back in the day when I was observing it in the life of leaders I've served with. But having to suffer the consequences of some decisions that I've had to make, I'm talking about I've had to make decisions that have cost me friendships, decisions that have cost people who at one time loved me, who won't even look at me or speak to me. If you're going to be a leader, listen. You just better get it in mind. You better be willing to suffer the consequences of their decisions. Because after some decisions, the people are not going to stand and applaud. No one is going to sing the doxology. No one is going to say, attaboy, attagirl. But if it's the right thing to do, and you're sure that it was the right thing to do, and you made the decision based on principles and not personalities, but based on principles, then you just need to know there's going to be some consequences. And though I did not really appreciate it as a young person when I was observing this in the life of leaders I served with, who when they made tough decisions, people talked about them. People severely criticized them. People even questioned their integrity and their motives. I saw them not waver, take the high road, keep quiet, keep moving ahead, because they were willing to suffer the consequences of their decisions. If you're younger, learn this early on. It will serve you well. This is the reason so many leaders fail, because they vacillate and they know that there's going to be fallout, and therefore they think by not deciding, they're avoiding making the decision. Remember from logic class, indecision is a decision, and you will suffer the consequences from that decision as well. So I made up my mind, if I'm going to suffer the consequences of my decisions, I want to make sure that my decisions are based on principles and data and information. And I learned that from leaders I served with who were willing to suffer the consequences of their decisions. The sixth thing I learned from leaders I have served with is they shared the credit with others. In the areas where I have served, the leader gives a year-end report. And the leaders that I served with that made the greatest impact on my life were leaders who shared the credit. When they gave their report, it was as if it sounded as though they hadn't done anything all year. And it was the team and this individual and this department and this area that accomplished all that was accomplished. Because good leaders don't take the credit, they share it. And if there's blame, they take responsibility for the organization. Don't think everything revolves around you. If someone under you, with you, does something excellent, give them the credit. Let them stand in the spotlight for a moment. The great leaders that I have observed were people who shared the credit. The seventh thing that I observed in the leaders I have known is they delegated. Maybe it wasn't for you, but it's been one of the harder things for me. Because if you've done something for any length of time, you have a system, you've become really good at it, and you think that you're going to delegate, and then you try to micromanage the people you delegate. Find tasks, find responsibilities that you can delegate to someone, turn them loose, give them feedback, absolutely, but also understand if you are the main leader of the organization, you can delegate tasks, but you are ultimately responsible for what happens in the organization. But the organization, to move forward, it's going to have to expand beyond all of the things that you're able to do, and you're going to have to involve others in your organization. The leaders I've known and I've served with, many of them were excellent at delegating. Number 8, and the final one that I want to talk about, is they were encouragers, the leaders I have known. A good leader does have an inspirational quality about them. Even when they have to deliver bad news, and if you're going to be a leader, you're going to have to deliver bad news. But even when those leaders that I've served with had to deliver bad news, they always still were people of hope. And they would fill the world with encouragement. You live in a discouraged world, a world where people are even contemplating just giving up, and what's the use? As a leader, we need to encourage our people, even when they fail. I remember there was one time early in my work that I felt like this was the end of the line. I had really failed. And I went to see my leader, and I just poured out my heart to him. And thinking he was going to say, hey, give me a resignation letter and get out of here, you're worthless. He told me of stories in his own life where same and similar things happened and how he overcame. And he was the first person that reminded me that when you go through these hard places and these difficulties, they're not the end of the line. These are some of our greatest school teachers. And he said, Ron, make sure you learn the lesson, and you'll be a better leader for having gone through this experience. And when I came in the door of that office, I was as discouraged in my young life as I had ever been. And when I left, I felt like I was filled with hope and encouragement, and that not only was I going to make it, I was going to make a difference. I don't know about you, my friends, but those are the kind of a leader I want to be. One who instills credit, who shares the credit, who encourages people, who delegates, one who's willing to suffer the consequence of any decision they make, one who gets focused on people, who's never defensive about what's happening, and when I need it, they're honest with me, but in a loving, kind way. And if you're in an organization, make sure you value everyone. And someday someone will be talking about the kind of leader you were who influenced them. You've been listening to Dr. Ron's Words of Wisdom, words on leadership, goal setting, productivity, and a whole lot more. Wherever you're listening to this podcast, if you would download and subscribe, it would be so helpful. And if you could leave a rating and write a brief review, it would be very, very helpful. Remember, leader, let's be people of hope. Be encouraged. I don't care how bad it is where you live. You are there for a reason. You're there to make a difference, and you're doing better than you think you are. Until next time, have a great and blessed week.